Portugal's non-habitual resident tax regime has gotten a lot of attention as a way that people can move to Southern Europe, enjoy a life in the sun, and pay relatively little, if not even zero taxes. But today I'm going to share with you 4 problems that you may not have considered when applying for the NHR. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. I'm the author of this best-selling book and the founder of Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best with our team of over 50 people around the world and our network of experts in Portugal and all other points. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. And what I want to talk about today is Portugal's NHR program. If you've been doing research on Portugal, you may have seen this, and a lot of people conflate the tax incentives that Portugal has with the golden visa or other visas that they have. You always want to separate taxes from immigration. They are 2 separate things, possibly to be paired together. But I want to share with you some concerns about the NHR program and mistakes that I see people make or assumptions that I see them make. Now, if you're a crypto investor, a crypto trader, and you're just investing for your own benefit, you're not in business, then you're probably going to have the easiest time of anybody moving to Portugal and reducing your taxes, possibly to 0. But if you're running a business, if you're trading in other assets, then you definitely want to be aware of what exactly is involved, because my macro kind of layman's assessment of Portugal's NHR is if you're used to paying some taxes, you're going to move to Portugal and pay less tax. This is not a traditional tax haven where you just show up and with no muss, no fuss, no filings, leave me alone, don't bother me, you're going to pay 0. It is a place where your foreign income can be untouched. You can bring in things like pension income at very low rates. You can be a freelancer and do work on the ground at a reduced tax rate. But you're not generally going to get away, again with the exception of some crypto people, with paying absolutely nothing. And really, Europe can be, in my opinion, low tax, but it's very rarely going to be 0 tax. If you look at any of the different regimes, whether it's a lump sum, whether it's a non-dom, whether it's territorial tax that might exist in a couple of Eastern European non-EU countries, or some kind of tax exemption like this, you're generally going to pay something. And Europe equals work. You're going to have to do things like file tax returns. You're going to have to register. You're going to have to do various stuff. And again, if you're certain types of people, you're going to have to do a good amount of planning. Now, the first problem that you're going to encounter is that the NHR is not a lifetime tax exemption. It is not a tax status for the country. It is something that you can register for. You can prove that you haven't been living in Portugal, and you can get this status, and it's good for 10 years. Now, if you're going to be living in Portugal for a long enough period of time and you're willing to learn the language and have some connections to the country, you can become a citizen of Portugal the same way you naturalize anywhere else. And so in that way, you're getting a pretty good deal in Portugal, in that even if you're paying some tax, you can move from a country like the US or Canada or Australia or any other high tax country, move to Portugal, have a soft landing, dramatically reduce your taxes in many cases, and work on a pretty good quality second passport. Once you have that passport, you have the same rights as any other EU citizen. You can move to other EU countries or other EEA countries that may have their own tax incentives. And so if you're willing to move around every 10 years or every X number of years, depending on where you may be moving in the future, you're gaining access to a number of countries which, because of the size of Europe, there are always going to be some places in all likelihood that are going to offer you a decent tax regime. Of course, you could also get your Portuguese citizenship or simply leave after 10 years and go and live somewhere else that's tax friendly. But this is not a place where you're going to live and pay very little tax for the rest of your life. So that's the first mistake. The second problem is that if you're in business, you cannot simply have your company just anywhere. So I had someone recently who came to me, and he is running a company in Hong Kong. And there are traditional offshore jurisdictions, the Belize's, the BVI's, those kind of places. There is the onshore is the new offshore that we talk about for the last couple of years, the UAE's, the Hong Kong's. There are the more prestigious jurisdictions like the Cayman Islands, and there are lots of other places in there in between. A lot of these very tax-friendly jurisdictions are simply not going to work in Portugal. And so if you are already offshore and you're thinking to yourself, hey, you know what, I want to get that high-quality second passport. Maybe you're a U.S. citizen and you don't want to be a U.S. citizen, but you really want to have an equivalent quality passport that gets you back into the U.S., that lets you travel before you pull the plug. Maybe you are from what we would call a Tier C passport country. Your passport's not very good and you want to get the Portuguese passport. That's great. And if you're deciding, hey, I'm going to move to Portugal, I'm going to put the time in, I'm going to have this tax status and the immigration benefit, fine. But if you're already offshore, you may need to change your current structure. That includes people from the United States who may need to change their structure, even though the U.S., you probably don't think of it as a tax haven, because if you're a U.S. citizen living in the U.S., you're probably paying a lot of taxes. But even U.S. companies may be excluded under the NHR, and so you're going to have to structure your business differently. Now, here's the question. Are you willing to pay some tax for the privilege of being in Portugal under the NHR? Let's say you make $1 million a year. Are you willing to pay, somewhere in the 5 figures? Let's say you make $10 million a year. Are you willing to pay in the 6 figures or even possibly 7 figures for the privilege of living in Portugal using this NHR? Again, the passport, being able to become a citizen of an EU country, the lifestyle may all be worth it, but everyone has their own price tag to put on something. And part of that, by the way, means that not having your company anywhere means you're not going to be able to go and set up shop, generally speaking, in a place where you never have to file a return, never have to do any work. It's simply not going to happen. So again, Europe equals work. If you want to live there, you can greatly reduce your tax rate. But for someone who is making a high 7 or 8 figure income, they're going to pay millions of dollars. And so in that case, you might start to say, okay, well, I want the passport. Let me just go and bite the bullet right now, and obtain Malta's citizenship by making a donation and waiting a much lesser period of time and not really needing to put much time in or learn a language. So you have to kind of add up the cost. You have to kind of add in the lifestyle, but understand that one of the problems of Portugal's NHR is you don't have the total freedom to base your business anywhere, including places that you wouldn't think of as tax havens. The third problem with the Portugal NHR is that if you are going to run a business in another country that complies to Portugal's NHR, is that you're still not going to be able to basically have an establishment or effective management in Portugal. And so there's steps that you're going to have to take to make sure that you don't do that. And depending on your business, that may mean doing some things that you'd rather not do. Now, I've really never had anybody be like, that sounds terrible. But again, Europe equals work. You're going to have to basically create a paper trail of how the business is being run, where the business is being run. And this is why really we say, we work with 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs, because it's a cost to doing this. And if you're moving to Portugal and you've got a business that makes $100,000 a year, it's a lot of work when combined with the cost and combined with the tax memoranda and all the, the thinking that goes into this, to simply just move there. If I'm making 100 grand, unless I really want to live in Portugal and I really don't mind the work because I'm just coming from a place where they're beating me on tax and I'm just doing the work already, I'm probably going to choose to go somewhere else. I personally might choose to go somewhere else regardless because I just don't want to be in Western Europe as much. It's not worth the hassle. But if you want to be there, understand that you're not necessarily going to be managing your company from Portugal, and you're going to have to set up what makes that work. The other problem is that freelancers and employees often don't qualify. Now there's what's called a high value scheme, where if you are a high value person, then you can get further incentives. But for someone who is just doing freelance work, you're really not going to qualify for just wiping out your tax bill. There is a reduced rate of 20%, and so again, maybe it's worth paying 20% to live in Portugal. Maybe that's lower than what you'd pay somewhere else. If you're coming from somewhere else in Europe and you just have the right to move to Portugal as an EU citizen and you want to settle and you say, hey, listen, I'm just starting out, I'll pay 20%. That works for me. I get the lifestyle, I have my tax home, everything works very cleanly. That may well be worth it. But you do have to understand that you could go somewhere else and you could pay less. You could potentially pay zero. So is that worth it to be NHR? Is that worth it to live in Portugal? That's the question that you have to ask yourself. So the bottom line in Portugal is if you are the 7 or 8 figure entrepreneur that we're talking about, you can probably structure your business and your affairs to get your tax rate down into the single digits. It's going to require some work. It's going to require some thinking. It's going to require some policies and procedures that you need to follow. If you don't want to plan, if you don't want to have any restrictions, then a place like a Dubai or the Cayman Islands or any other tax-free jurisdiction whether you have your company there and therefore get residence, or whether you obtain residence by another means and then your company sits somewhere else through planting multiple flags, that may be a better fit for you. I really can't emphasize enough. People hear about these tax incentives and the word gets out, zero tax. It's really not that simple. For a small portion of people, it may be. For most people, it's going to be more work and you're going to be paying something. You've got to determine if that's worth it for you. So people ask, Andrew, how do I get the most out of Nomad Capitalist? How do I begin my Nomad Capitalist journey? The first thing people do is they start right where you're at. They watch YouTube, they listen to podcasts, they read articles at nomadcapitalist.com. We've spent years creating thousands of pieces of free content so that you can get the vibe from someone who's actually done this, from someone who's actually been in your shoes. What they'll do next, they'll get a copy of the book. You can find it on Amazon. It costs a few bucks, and while it's not going to give you all the secrets, it's going to, again, give you more of the vibe. You're going to learn a lot of the things that I've learned. You're going to learn some strategies you can employ, and you're going to get a lot further in your journey. From there, if you are the 7 or 8 figure entrepreneur investor, you can go to nomadcapitalist.com. You can click Become a Client. We're pretty busy these days, but we have availability to help a limited number of people who want to create a holistic plan, something that I think is so important. So if you want to do that, go to nomadcapitalist.com, click Become a Client, learn more about how it works and how we can help you.